Now, I know we have scheduled the cartel doctrine and the pure and perfect competition doctrine, and in the supplement, the cartel doctrine comes first. But I'm going to deal with the pure and perfect competition doctrine first because I think that's more significant and requires some more discussion. This is the doctrine I referred to last week as a degree of significance approaching the laughable. If you take Bull Moose ruling the world as the near terrifying, this doctrine introduces some humor into the discussion. Not intentionally, that's just the way it works out. Now, what this is at the bottom line, and this is the humor, it's ridiculous, it's tantamount to a denunciation of business as monopolistic, not because it's gouging the consumers or ruling the world or anything of the kind, but in the last analysis, simply for refusing to sustain unnecessary losses. That's what the charge of monopoly or monopolistic behavior actually reduces to. And we'll see just how and why this is so shortly. Let's start with the meaning of pure and perfect competition, or PPC for short. The best way to understand it, I think, is to simply take it as the set of conditions, whatever they may be, required to drive price to equality with marginal cost. The set of conditions required to drive price to equality with marginal cost. Now, I know that may not be immediately too meaningful. You might not have a good understanding of the concept of marginal cost, which this concept of pure and perfect competition builds upon. So we'll get to that in a minute or so. But the meaning of pure and perfect competition is essentially whatever it takes in order to lead profit-seeking businessmen, I should add that in order to lead profit-seeking businessmen voluntarily in their quest for profit to end up setting their prices equal to marginal cost. It's the set of conditions required to lead profit-seeking businessmen to set their prices equal to marginal cost. Now, there are two principal conditions that are needed to do this. One is the existence of an enormous number of individually insignificant firms in an industry. The industry has to consist of a huge number of individually insignificant firms. That's the main condition in order to bring it about that profit-seeking businessmen will end up finding it worthwhile to charge a price equal to marginal cost. The next most important condition is that all the firms be producing perfectly identical, interchangeable products, so that if a consumer is deciding between any two products, it's possible that the slightest difference in price will be the decisive consideration. If we had products absolutely identical in every respect, then the one which was the least bit cheaper than the other would be the one that you'd want to buy. So this perfect interchangeability, perfect substitutability, perfect uniformity of all the producers' products in an industry, coupled with a huge number of producers, those are the two essential conditions for pure and perfect competition, the conditions that would lead businessmen in pursuit of profit to charge a price equal to marginal cost. Now, that is not yet meaningful if you don't understand the concept of marginal cost. And so that's point 3, the meaning of marginal cost. It is the extra cost required to produce an additional unit of output. The extra cost required to produce an additional unit of output. Now, usually, although not always, just usually, this extra cost will be the cost of labor, materials, and fuel. The standard assumption is We already have our factory. We already have the equipment installed in the factory. So normally, we can produce a greater number of units in our existing factory with our existing equipment. But to produce additional units, even in those circumstances, will typically require the employment of additional labor, the use of additional materials, and the use of additional fuel. And so they're the extra inputs that we require, and the cost of acquiring them, that's the extra cost, that's the marginal cost of producing the additional output, typically. Now, there are some exceptions which we can note, and this is the sub-point. Marginal cost means different things in different contexts. It can equal full cost, it could equal zero, or anything in between, depending on the context. Now, where might it equal full cost? Well, suppose we have a factory and it's operating at its absolute limit of capacity. Imagine we have an automobile factory, and this particular factory is already turning out all of the cars it can turn out. Well, what would we require to turn out one additional car more beyond the absolute limit of this factory's capacity? We need another factory now. Okay, well, what will be the extra cost of producing that extra automobile? The first car of the new factory, the first car beyond the absolute capacity of our present factory. If we have to build a factory to produce that car, what's the marginal cost?
It'll be the cost of the product plus the cost to build the building?
It'll be the entire cost of the whole factory. Maybe it'll be $1 billion or more. So here we are, the marginal cost to get the very first car from the brand new factory, which counts the cost of getting the factory, that might be $1 billion. Okay, what's the marginal cost of the second car from that factory?
Labor, materials, and fuel.
It'll be the labor, materials, and fuel, and that might be just a few $1,000s. So the marginal cost plunges from the cost of the whole factory and all of its equipment down to the extra cost of just the labor, materials, and fuel to produce the additional unit. And then a marginal cost over the whole range of capacity of that new factory would represent just additional cost of labor, materials, and fuel. It would always be in the range of just a few $1,000s per unit. Now, we can have still different contexts for marginal cost. Suppose you're considering the marginal cost of constructing a house, and we're starting from the point where you don't even yet have the land. Well, what would the marginal cost of getting a house include if we're beginning from the point where we have not yet even acquired the land for the house? Well, it's not zero. We haven't made any expenditures. Our expenditures up to this point are zero. But in order to have the house, we have yet to make all of the necessary expenditures. So what would the marginal cost of the house embrace from this starting point of not even having the land? The cost of the land, the full cost of construction, completing the house, everything. Now, what if we have acquired the land? So we've already acquired the land. We just haven't done anything with it yet. What would the marginal cost include from this point on? It would include all of the construction costs, maybe digging a foundation or at least laying a slab and then constructing the whole house. If we have a house where the foundation or slab is in and the framing is already up, what's the marginal cost from that point on?
Whatever is remaining to complete the house.
Whatever is remaining to complete it, so it would be the cost of the wiring, perhaps the siding, the roofing, the painting. If we already have a fully complete house, well, then it's all ready to go. Then we might have virtually no marginal cost. So it can mean different things in different circumstances. Suppose you already have a finished inventory in a business, and the inventory is already stacked on the shelves. What's the marginal cost of moving the inventory? Or close to zero. Maybe it would be just a modest labor cost, or if we've already paid the workers, if you have workers whom you've already committed to pay for a day or a week or whatever, and you have the goods on the shelves, well, then again we might have a case where there's virtually no marginal cost of moving the inventory. So the point here is that marginal cost is capable of meaning different things in different circumstances. It's always the extra cost, the cost yet to be incurred in order to reach some given objective, whether it's producing something or selling it or whatever. It's always the cost that lies in front of us in order to accomplish some given objective. Now, let's turn to the alleged significance of marginal cost, which, as I've said, is typically understood to refer to the cost of labor, materials, and fuel. Now, what makes marginal cost significant, supposedly, is that it is a measure, it's taken as a measure of the value of output foregone in order to produce the output in question. The marginal cost of an output is taken as measuring the value of alternative output foregone in order to produce the output in question.
Is it the opportunity cost?
It's very similar to opportunity cost. It's closely related to opportunity cost. It would be a form of opportunity cost. Yes, that's a good observation. Marginal cost is taken as measuring the value of foregone opportunities. Now, how so? Well, let's say we're contemplating the production of additional automobiles. And there's a certain monetary value of this marginal cost. And now the additional elements required to produce an additional automobile would be some labor, some materials, and some fuel. Well, very closely related to this doctrine is the doctrine of marginal productivity, the doctrine of marginal productivity, according to which the value of the labor, the materials, the fuel, the value of all of the factors of production is itself derived from the value of the alternative products that could be produced with it. So if you have to pay the workers in an automobile plant a certain wage to turn out an extra automobile, it's held that the wage that you have to pay them is derived from the value of alternative products that labor might otherwise be employed to produce. So if the labor in an automobile factory might also be used to produce washing machines or refrigerators or whatever, it's argued that the height of the wages reflects the foregone value of the refrigerators or washing machines or whatever that now cannot be produced because the labor required to produce them is working in the automobile plant. So if you have to pay the labor, let's say $2,000, the total labor required to produce one more car, if that has to be paid $2,000 to produce the car, it's argued that it works out to the $2,000 because the $2,000 is the value of the alternative marginal product of that labor in producing some other product. If we take that labor away from another product, we can't produce some quantity of some other product that's worth $2,000. And similarly with the materials and fuel. So the marginal cost of producing the automobile is supposed to be a measure of the value of alternative products that now cannot be produced because we're using the means of production to produce an additional automobile. Now, it's also argued that so long as the price of a product exceeds its marginal cost, so long as the price of a product is greater than its marginal cost, that means that society or the consumers or whoever are attaching a higher value to an additional unit of this product. The price of this product reflects the valuation of it by the consumers. They're attaching a higher value to an additional unit of this product than the consumers of other products are attaching to the alternative quantities of other products that have to be foregone to produce the additional unit of this product. So let's imagine in our case of automobiles, the price of a new automobile is $30,000, and the marginal cost of producing it is $15,000. Well, if that's the case, then it's argued the consumers are attaching a value of $30,000 to this automobile, and the alternative products that can't be produced in order to release the necessary labor, materials, and fuel to produce the automobile, and which are lost, they're valued only at $15,000. So it's appropriate to produce the additional automobile. We're gaining something that we value at $30,000, and we're foregoing other alternative products that we value at only $15,000. So it's argued in these circumstances, the production of automobiles should be expanded. Well, let's say we've done that. And so now we're producing more automobiles. For various reasons, it's argued that as production expands, marginal cost will tend to rise. That's a typical assumption. And of course, to sell the additional supply of output, what will be happening to the price of the output?
Rise.
Think of the law of demand.
Oh, the economies of scale as far as...
No, the law of demand. And the price will have to decrease to find buyers for additional units. So if we're producing more automobiles, the demand curve remaining the same, in order to find buyers for a larger quantity of automobiles, we'd have to have a lower price, right? Okay, well, let's say we're at the point we've stepped up the production of automobiles, and now, as a result, the price of automobiles is down to $25,000, and perhaps our marginal cost is up to $20,000. Now, why would the marginal cost be higher? Can anyone think of the principle, the law that would be referred to in support of rising marginal cost? The law of diminishing returns. The law of diminishing returns. Here we are. We have our given plant and equipment, but we're adding more of the other inputs, and the typical assumption is that as we hold the plant and equipment unchanged, but add the variable factor, labor, materials, and fuel, they will be encountering diminishing returns as we proceed. And so even if their prices remain the same, we would have rising marginal cost. That's the standard mainstream textbook assumption. So here we are, we're at the point because of more automobiles, the price is $25,000 down from $30,000. The marginal cost is up from $15,000 to $20,000. All right, what fundamental situation still prevails, though in lesser degree, in terms of the valuation of automobiles compared to the valuation of the alternative products that have to be foregone to make possible the production of additional automobiles?
The marginal cost is still greater, and you're giving up what you would for, it's still greater than the additional products that other consumers would want, so they would say continue to increase the automobile production.
You've just referred to marginal cost, but what is the relationship? I'm asking, what is the relationship between the value of automobiles and the value of the alternative products that can't be produced in order to produce more automobiles?
It's only 5,000.
The value of the alternative is increasing.
The alternative has increased, the value of automobiles has decreased, but which still exceeds which?
The automobile still exceeds.
And the value of the automobiles is still greater than the value of the alternatives. So that's supposed to mean that society is valuing additional automobiles above the loss of the alternative products required to make them possible. So what allegedly should be done? Pardon me?
Increase automobile production.
That automobile production should be further increased. There should be a further increase in automobile production. Now, how long should it still, until when should there be a further increase in automobile production?
Until the marginal cost is
Yes?
Until the marginal cost of the price.
Until the marginal cost and price are finally equal. If the price of automobiles is exceeding the marginal cost by $1, well, maybe we should still produce a little more, but we should produce up to the point where the value of the additional automobiles produced would drop below the marginal cost. We should carry the production of automobiles up to the point where the value of the last automobile produced still barely exceeds the marginal cost, and the production of one automobile more would put the value of automobiles below the marginal cost. Now, as a rough shorthand, we can describe that by saying the value of the automobiles and the marginal cost should be equal. The difference between them should be minimized. And if we had a broad enough market, the difference would approach zero. We have a minimum difference. And at that point, it would be held that the economy is getting the maximum possible use out of its limited variable factors of production. We're getting the maximum possible benefit. We're producing each product up to the point where it is still more valuable than the alternatives. We don't produce a product when it goes beyond the point when it gets to be less valuable than the alternatives. And the stopping point would be when the price is as close as possible to marginal cost, when it equals marginal cost. So I say here in point 4, price equal MC, MC representing marginal cost. That is seen as desirable because of alleged optimization of use of resources. So long as price greater than marginal cost, value of product gained greater than value of product lost, and thus pure and perfect competition as the set of conditions required to drive price to equality with marginal cost, that is seen as conditions necessary to optimize the use of resources. Pure and perfect competition serves to drive price to equality with marginal cost, and that represents the optimum use of resources. This is all according to the doctrine of pure and perfect competition. Well, now we need to turn to the treatment of fixed cost, and that's in point 5. How are fixed costs treated? Because after all, these costs of labor, materials, and fuel are not your only costs. You have other costs. You have depreciation cost. You have interest on borrowed capital. You have considerable overhead costs of other kinds. And the question is, how are these costs to be covered? Well, the explanation of how they're to be covered ends up being very analogous to what I refer to here as Ricardian land rent. Now, I don't know how much discussion we had of that before the midterm, Ricardian land rent, but it was definitely in the text. Does anyone recall discussion in class of land rent?
Is that based on the fact that by using so much land, it would, at a certain point, it would just be subsistence?
Well, that's related. It's argued we tend to increase in population and keep cultivating more and more land until the land last cultivated yields just subsistence. That's a closely related idea.
So you wouldn't have private ownership of the lands, you would
Well-
take it to a land board, so to speak?
Well, that is an argument made on the basis of the doctrine of land rent. but it's not an integral part of the doctrine of land rent. Yes, Mr. Underwood?
Doesn't it in the doctrine that as you go to decreasing valuable land, you have to pay rent on the first value of the second?
Yeah, it goes along those lines. Does anyone recall the meaning of land of the first quality, land of the second quality? That's ringing a bell. Okay, now, if we had a great abundance of land of the first quality, more land of the first quality than was being used, would land of the first quality yield a rent? Would anyone be paying for the use of land of the first quality if more of such land is available for the taking from nature? No. Okay, when will rent begin on land of the first quality? Okay, when all the land of the first quality is brought into cultivation, and at that point it's necessary to resort to land of the second quality, where the same labor yields less output, and at that point it would be worthwhile to pay something for the right to produce on land of the first quality, where your output was greater. And I gave the example at the time. Suppose a unit of labor could produce 100 on land of the first quality and only 90 on land of the second quality. And now all the land of the first quality is under cultivation. At that point, people would be willing to pay a rent of 10, up to a maximum of a rent of 10, for the right to produce on land of the first quality. But would land of the second quality yield rent at that point? When would land of the second quality yield rent? Yeah, only when it was fully utilized and it was necessary to resort to land of the third quality. Okay, well, the recovery of any part of the value of plant and equipment is implied to take place in the same way. The recovery of fixed costs, from the perspective of this theory, the fixed costs are only properly recoverable as and when that category of plant and equipment becomes scarce. And at that point, it can yield a kind of plant and equipment rent, a scarcity rent, just like land of the first quality or land of the second quality. But any allowance for fixed costs, any allowance for the recovery of fixed costs, other than in the case of plant and equipment being scarce, that is held to represent some form of monopolistic withholding of supply. If you're recovering your fixed costs short of the point of capacity operation of that category of plant and equipment, that would be held to be based on some form of monopolistic restriction of supply. Let me try to develop this. I refer to the fish case. The fish case. This will bring out the principle. Now, what I mean by the fish case is, let us suppose that somewhere we have a primitive fishing village. And this village, obviously, it's primitive, so it does not have any kind of freezing facility. It doesn't have a canning facility. It doesn't even have the means of salting the fish. Now, that means that whatever fish are caught will have to be consumed in a fairly short time, or they spoil. So that's one consideration to hold in mind. Now, let's assume that the little fishing fleet of this village goes out and has a hugely successful catch. They come back, their decks are overflowing with fish. But they have such an abundant catch of fish that in order to consume it all in the short period before it would spoil, people just could not do it. There's more fish than people want to eat. There's so many fish that if they were all to be eaten, the local population and the local cat population would be sick from overeating. So in those circumstances, what would be the marginal utility of fish? Zero, or even negative. But let's leave it at zero. The marginal utility of fish would be zero. That means that some of the fish could be lost with no diminution in benefit. Now, in such circumstances, if you were to move all the supply that people would want for any possible positive purpose of any kind, what kind of price would have to be charged?
Very low price.
Well, how much of a price? Let's suppose you were charging a penny a fish. Are there any fish that anyone would not buy that he would take if the fish were free? Mightn't a penny be of some value to somebody? And if fish are a penny, he'll say, okay, I consider still extra fish worth less than a penny, so I won't buy them. But if you gave them away for free, well, then I might take them. Would there be such cases? Okay, so in that case, what should be the price of fish? If there's so many of them, that zero. The price of fish should be zero. That's implied in this case. Now, there are some further implicit elements in this case which we should bring out. From the perspective of the supporters of this theory, they take for granted certain propositions. One proposition they take for granted is that at least from a moral perspective, not from a legal perspective necessarily, but from a moral perspective, all property is rightfully owned by the community. The community has a right to the property of all the sellers. They have a basic right to the benefit from the property of all the sellers. And therefore, if the sellers have brought in a superabundant catch of fish, the community has a right to benefit from it. That's one underlying proposition. To elaborate it a bit, it would imply that the private owners are owners in a very limited sense. They're sort of trustees or stewards of the community's property, that the community is the true owner, in this case of their fish, and even of their fishing boats and any other means of production they may have. In the text, I call this the tribal concept of property, that the property is actually owned by the tribe, not by the individual legal owners, that morally it's supposedly owned by the tribe. Now, very closely related to this doctrine is another doctrine that I describe in the text as the rationing theory of prices, which is that a price is only justified as a means of rationing a scarce supply among the needs and wants of the consumers contending for them. A price is only justified if the quantity available is less than sufficient to serve all possible positive purposes that a supply might serve. Now, in this particular case, is the supply less than is required to meet all positive purposes that a supply might serve? Is the supply less than that in this case? No, it isn't. So it's for that reason that the price is supposed to be zero. Okay, so keep these two doctrines in mind, the tribal concept of property, the rationing theory of prices. Okay, now here we are. The fishermen, if they were to behave in accordance with the way this theory would like them to behave, they'd have to give their fish away for nothing. They'd be financially ruined. Here they are, they've gone out to sea, they perhaps risked their lives and their ships. They've come back with a super huge catch, and now they're going to get absolutely nothing for it. And they have bills to pay, wages to pay, and they'll have to give their product away for nothing. Well, what do you think some of the fishermen might come up with? What plan do you think they might come up with as a means of avoiding this?
Limit the supply, just dump the fish.
Pardon?
Limit the supply, just dump the extra fish.
Yeah, dump some of the fish back. How about dumping some fish back to the point where the supply of fish is now less than sufficient to meet all possible wants, which means there's some element of scarcity of fish, and the fish will command a positive price. Well, what would they be denounced for? What would they be denounced as doing in this case? Yes? Yeah, they'd be denounced as practicing a monopolistic withholding of supply and the creation of an artificial scarcity in order to raise the price. Now, you see, do you recognize that they would be denounced as having practiced a monopolistic withholding of supply? Okay, now, if one says they're guilty of a monopolistic withholding of supply, doesn't that imply that properly, morally, the whole supply should go to the consuming public, that the consuming public has a right to their full supply?
Well, they still have to earn a living, and still have to...
Yeah, that's true, but they're denounced as guilty of a monopolistic withholding of supply. That denunciation rests on the foundation that the public has a right to the full supply, that the full supply is what belongs properly to the public, that the public has some kind of moral ownership claim to the full supply. That's why I refer to the tribal concept of property, and that there should be no price if the supply is in fact large enough to require no price, that the price would only be justified if the supply were scarce, not by deliberate withholding, but just because the catch turned out that way. If the catch were less than sufficient to overcome all scarcity, then a price would be okay. But this time, it's argued, we have a superabundant catch. It's a monopolistic withholding of supply to throw any back, to establish a price. So the only price justified is zero. This is the basis for this. Okay, so that's the underlying backdrop. Now, these elements in the fish case, we are now going to transfer to the conditions of our modern society by means of the machine case. And that's the next case. And here, there's going to be an important element of similarity to the fish case, and that is we will have a machine that has a limited capacity to produce. I assume it has a capacity to produce 1 million units of product. So here we are, we've got a company that owns a machine. The machine has the capability within a limited period of time of producing up to 1 million units of product. Now, obviously, you have to run materials through the machine. You have to apply labor with the materials, but the machine is capable of turning out, with the aid of labor and materials, 1 million units of product. Let us view the machine not as one machine, but in terms of its contribution to the products it can produce. Let us think of the machine as representing a supply of 1 million service units. The machine represents the ability to contribute 1 million units of services to the production of 1 million units of product. One machine service unit per product, per unit of product. So we can get 1 million units of product, and the machine contributes 1 unit of its service to each unit of product that results. So here we are, the supply of machine service units is 1 million machine service units. Okay, what is the alleged right of the community with respect to these million service units of machine capacity? They have the right to the use of the whole million. Now, under what circumstances should there be a price on a machine service unit?
And it goes beyond 1 million.
Pardon me?
Marginal cost.
Well, the marginal cost would pertain to the value of the labor and materials that have to be used in connection with a machine.
Demand levels?
Pardon me?
Demand levels?
Well, the demand level would be something extremely relevant.
So unless you're using the million, you're not supposed to.
All right. Yes, can you say that a little louder?
Okay, unless you're actually building 1 million units, then it implies you're not supposed to put fixed costs as part of your price.
Yeah, exactly. Unless the service units are scarce, which means that we're using all 1 million available, and people would like still more than that. So even though we're using all 1 million, that's not enough to satisfy all possible uses of these service units. So they're scarce. Only as and when they're scarce is a price justified. See, just as with the fish, a price was justified only as and when the fish were scarce, here with the machine service units, any allowance for the contribution of the machine is proper only as and when the machine services are scarce. And so if it's capable of producing, rendering 1 million service units, only if at a price of 0 per service unit, only if the quantity of such service units demanded at a 0 price would be greater than 1 million, only then is a price justified. Let's imagine that if the service units of machinery were given away for free, if nothing were charged in the product price to cover the service units of machinery, suppose people would desire 2 million units of product. Suppose if we charged a product price, say of $8 per unit, let's imagine the cost of the labor and materials per unit of product is $8 per unit. And that's the marginal cost. And we're charging a price just equal to marginal cost, a price of $8. If at that price of $8, the quantity demanded of the product were more than 1 million, perhaps 2 million, then it would be argued, okay, now we need a price above marginal cost, we need a price higher than marginal cost to hold down the quantity of product demanded to the maximum of the 1 million that can be produced. So imagine it would take a price of $50 to do that. If $50 were the price required to limit the quantity demanded to the 1 million units of supply available, and the cost of the labor, materials, and fuel was $8, well, then what would be the implied scarcity value of a service unit of machinery? Well, $50 is the price of the product. $42. Now, just think, there's a certain logic to this. Suppose our machine had the capacity not to produce 1 million units of product, but only 999,999. What then would be lost? What product worth how much would be lost if it takes a price of $50 to balance a quantity demanded with the limited supply available? $42 would be lost. Why? Well, this product worth $50 couldn't continue to be produced, but what about the labor and materials worth $8 that are used to produce it? We wouldn't use the labor and materials that would be needed to produce the millionth unit. We now don't have the contribution from the machine, so we can't use that last labor and material. Where do they go? Can they do anything? Well, they go into their alternative uses where they're worth $8. Remember, the marginal cost is derived allegedly from the value of alternative products foregone. Well, the $8 value of the labor and materials, if we don't have them, if we can't use them with a machine, they'll go and produce more of some other product where their contribution will only be $8. So if we lose $50 in the value of this product and gain $8 elsewhere, what's the net loss? $42. So it would be argued in the case of this kind, something depends on the presence or absence of this millionth service unit of plant and equipment. It's genuinely scarce, and it should be able to command any price that's required to reflect its scarcity value. And in this case, it would be $42 per service unit. Now, of course, in reality, the very people who claim that this is their doctrine, they'd be finding a million reasons why $50 is too high a price, and they'd probably be advocating a price control. But we'll forget about that, and we'll just take them with the logic of this particular theory at this particular time. Okay, but let's now work a slightly different case, which we have in this table. And here we have not a $50 price of the product, but we have, this is the second column, we have 3 different prices, $10, $9, $8. And just to the left, we have another column labeled quantity supplied and demanded in thousands, the quantity supplied and demanded at that price. So here we are, we're assuming in this table that if the price of the product that this machine helps to produce is $10, that at that $10 price of the product, people will only be attempting to buy 500,000 units of the product. And we're assuming the marginal cost is $8. Okay, well, by how much does the value of the product exceed the marginal cost? $2. And now that $2 I describe as an implied machine rent. It's an implied allowance in the $10 price of the product for the services of the machine. But notice, are the services of the machine scarce if there's 1 million service units available and only 500,000 of them are actually being used? No. Okay, well then, from the perspective of this theory, is there any just basis for there being an implied rent for the service unit of the machine? No. So what should allegedly happen to the price of the product?
Should go down.
It should go down. The sellers, something should be working to make the sellers reduce the price. All right, well, let's say they do, and they reduce the price from $10 to $9. And at the $9 price, there's some increase in quantity demanded. It goes up to 600,000 units. Okay, well, now we're using 600,000 units out of the million that are available. Would anything be lost if a service unit of plant and equipment were lost? And we only had 999,999, out of which we only used 600,000. There'd be nothing lost. So should there be any value attaching to a service unit? No, but we still have $1 attaching. So where should the price of a service unit go? Where should the implied machine rent go? To zero. To zero. And that would occur if the price of the product were cut to its marginal cost of $8. At $8, there's no margin left for the machine services. And from the perspective of this theory, there should be none. Why? Because it's not scarce. The machine services are not scarce. Well, what will happen if the firm that owns this machine is nevertheless continuing to charge $10 or even $9? What will they allegedly be guilty of? A monopolistic withholding of supply. It's argued that their obligation, their moral obligation, is that they should be making their service units available to its true moral owner, the community, to the point of a zero price if the item is not scarce, that a price is justified only as and when the service units of the machinery become scarce. Now that would happen if at the price of $8, the quantity demanded surpassed 1 million units. Then you would need a price higher than $8 to limit quantity demanded to the million service units, to conform to the million service units of capacity available. But only then would it be argued that it's proper to recover anything toward your fixed cost. Yes, Mr. Feldman.
Who would be the people that believe in that philosophy of doctrine?
Who are the people who believe in this? All of the authors of all the mainstream economics textbooks.
Is that right?
Yes. Now, I don't think they see it perhaps quite as clearly as this, and one of the things that enables this not to be seen so clearly is the assumption that marginal cost is continually rising. If you look at a typical marginal cost curve in a mainstream textbook, you'll find that it's drawn as rising over almost the whole length. It starts off very high, like the first car out of the new automobile factory, but then plunges way down when we get to the second car, and then it's assumed very slowly and gradually rises thereafter. Now, in reality, if you think of the conditions, let's say in any factory, even if you have a situation in which marginal cost might rise, do you think it's rising smoothly and continuously? Or would it be more accurate perhaps to describe it as a series of steps, long steps, where we have, let's say, there's one long level here, and then perhaps there's a rise here, and then it goes at a long level. For example, suppose you're going from 2-shift operation to 3-shift operation in the same plant. Probably your costs of operating the 3rd shift would be higher. But if you're on the 3rd shift, do you think that the marginal cost per unit would be rising over the length of the whole 3rd shift?
No.
I wouldn't think so. And it probably is not rising over the first 2 shifts. I would think marginal cost as being pretty flat, and then maybe it jumps a bit, and then it's flat again. Now, you can also have a situation, let's say, where a firm has different grades of capacity. Let's say they have some brand new capacity. You might think in terms of computers, perhaps. Let's say you have some Pentium 4s with the high megahertz microprocessors. That represents your most recent computers. Then you have a bunch of older Pentium 3 computers that are less efficient. And then possibly you might even have some still older Pentium 2 computers that you normally might not even use, but are just sitting somewhere. All right. The same kind of situation could apply to many different types of machinery. The newest, most efficient machinery will have, in some degree, will have older, less efficient machinery, and perhaps still older, still less efficient machinery. Let's imagine that we have a plant which 20% of its overall total capacity consists of the newest, most modern equipment. That's 20%. The next 60% of its total overall capacity consists of somewhat older, less efficient capacity. And then its final 20% of capacity is still older, still less efficient capacity. I think this is not an atypical kind of situation. All right, under what conditions, from the perspective of this theory, would it be entitled to earn anything on its newest, most modern plant and equipment?
It reaches full capacity.
When it reaches 100% capacity of the whole operation?
Yeah.
Well, how about 100% capacity?
That's accurate.
100% capacity of the 20% that represents the newest, most modern plant and equipment. When it reaches 20% of capacity, the newest capacity, that's the most efficient, that's already fully running, isn't it? So that capacity would be in a state of scarcity at that point. All right, but what about if the firm is operating anywhere between 20% of capacity and anything less than 80%? From the perspective of this theory, would it be entitled to earn anything on its middling 60% of capacity?
That 60% was filled when they could justify.
Well, if it were filled, but is it filled if they're operating at less than 80% of capacity overall?
No.
Suppose they're operating at 75% of capacity. It would be held that if they're using their most efficient 20% to its limit, well, that's scarce. That's like land of the first quality. It's yielding rent.
Right.
But what about the land of the capacity of the second quality that's not yet scarce?
It wouldn't be generating anything.
Then it would be held not properly to earn anything. But in reality, it most likely would. In reality, when firms are operating at 75% of capacity or even somewhat below that, don't they normally recover at least some substantial part of their depreciation? Okay, well, that would be considered the result of a monopolistic withholding of supply if the firm had the ability to produce up to 80% of capacity without any further increase in its costs, but they're recovering depreciation on this broad 60% without it being scarce. So this is what the theory comes down to. And this is why I introduced it by saying that it amounts to a criticism of business as being monopolistic, as being imperfectly competitive, really for no other reason than refusing to sustain unnecessary losses. Its monopolistic behavior is gaining recovery of some part of its plant and equipment, even though that category of plant and equipment is not in a state of scarcity. And the denunciation is, here we are, they have the ability to produce more from that plant and equipment. It's not scarce, but they're getting a price. They're getting some allowance for plant and equipment that's not scarce. Just like the fishermen are getting something on fish that were not scarce, because they threw some back. It's argued that the firms are withholding capacity from the market. They're withholding the use of part of their capacity from the market in order to secure a better price on the lesser portion that they do allow to get to the market. That's the argument. Now, you can understand some things that would otherwise seem quite bizarre. And we're now in point 6. And this is where we'll see the need for a huge number of sellers and perfect product uniformity as the principal conditions for getting the sellers to drive price to equality with marginal cost. I introduced the subject by saying pure and perfect competition is the set of conditions that would need to exist to get profit-seeking businessmen to end up setting their prices equal to marginal cost, to accepting no return on their fixed capacity unless it were scarce. Well, let's see how that would work. Let's suppose we start off, a deep recession has just developed. And so we have a bunch of firms that find themselves operating at only 50% of capacity. And these are firms that could produce substantially more than at 50%, and do so without any addition to marginal cost. They would not have any higher marginal cost until they reached 80% of capacity. Well, what's supposed to happen to their selling prices from the perspective of this theory? Let's say, let me add an additional descriptor. Let's suppose that before the deep recession, back in the days before the recession started, the typical firm was operating at 85% of capacity. And so it was able to charge a price that would enable it to recover depreciation on its first 2 grades of capacity. They could charge a high enough price to recover depreciation on its newest, most efficient 20%, and also on its capacity of second quality, representing the next 60%. And they could even earn some profit besides. Okay, but now here we are, because of the recession, they've gone from 85% of capacity operation to 50% of capacity operation. Well, what supposedly should happen to their selling price?
Should go up.
Pardon me?
Wouldn't their selling price go up if the quantity produced is less?
Well, why is the quantity produced less? You see, if it were less because of something originating on the side of supply, if terrorists bombed half of our factories of some kind, then we'd have a lesser supply, there'd be a higher price. But what is bringing about the reduction in operation here? A sharp decline in demand. Now, when demand falls, what happens to price?
Falls.
It should fall. Okay, now how far should the price fall from the perspective of the pure and perfect competition doctrine and its claim that price should equal marginal cost?
But it's that 85%?
Pardon me?
So it reaches that percentage that it was at previous?
The price should drop till it equals marginal cost. Now, if somehow that snapped us back to 85%, then no problem. But let's say we're going to stay down at a low percentage of capacity. Maybe the price reductions will push us from 50% to 65%. And so we'll get back to 65% capacity operation. Where should the price be from the perspective of this theory?
until it hits 100%, shouldn't it be very low or nothing, really? Nothing.
It should be at the level of marginal cost on the broad middle 60%. The price should come down to equal only the marginal cost of production on this capacity of the second quality. And so the firms would be recovering nothing on that part of their capacity. Now, it's argued that what would be required to make this happen, would be the existence of an enormous number of individually insignificant sellers, all producing a perfectly uniform, interchangeable product. Now, why would this be the case? Let's say here we are, everyone wakes up one morning and they see they're only at 50% of capacity, but they're still getting the old price that they had been getting before the recession. They're still getting a price that is much above their marginal cost on their presently idle capacity. Now, if we had this immense number of insignificant sellers, all producing a perfectly uniform product, then it's argued the way each seller would perceive the world would be, he would think, if I reduce my price this ever so slightly, let's say by 1 mil, 1/10 of 1 cent per unit, the market will see that I'm now the best supplier. So what would happen to my quantity demanded if everyone makes no distinction of any kind between my product and anyone else's product, but my product is 1 mil cheaper?
Should be all
Demand
over
goes
there.
up.
How much should the quantity demanded of my product go up? Let's say here I am supplying 1/10,000th of the total supply. I'm supplying 1/100th of 1% of the supply. If I trim my price 1 mil, where should everyone want to buy? Everyone should suddenly want to buy from me. So what should be the effect of this on my operating rate, my 1 mil price reduction?
Increase revenue.
Pardon me?
You should get the whole market.
Everyone will be attempting to buy from me. Now, I can't supply the whole market. I'm still, if I'm at 50% of capacity, even if I go to 100%, then I'll be 2/100ths of 1% of the industry. But everyone would like to buy from me. People will be pounding on my door to buy from me. And the point is that I will allegedly be able to leap from 50% of capacity to full capacity by the most insignificant price reduction. So how will the effect of a price reduction appear to me in terms of what I can gain from it?
It would appear very good.
It would seem like this is obviously the sensible thing to do. I cut my price 1 mil, and my operating rate goes from 50% to full capacity. So this would be fabulously profitable. Now, there's only one thing wrong, though, and that is that supposedly all the 10,000 producers would be having this thought at the same time. And so they will all be motivated to trim their price 1 mil, each thinking that this is what's profitable, the most profitable thing I can do. Well, what happens as the result of this price cut? If everybody in the whole industry is ending up cutting his price 1 mil, the demand will be virtually unchanged. It may go up 1/100,000th of 1% or whatever. It'll go up as the industry demand curve moves. Not moves, but it'll go up to the extent that this infinitesimally lower price might represent some infinitesimal expansion in quantity demanded of the industry as a whole. But what thought will still persist from the perspective of each of these 10,000 insignificant producers? How will a further price reduction appear? Pardon me? Again, as absolutely desirable. So what's going to happen to the price of the product if, so long as they're operating well below capacity, and so long as the way each of them perceives the market is that the slightest reduction in price by him means a huge expansion in quantity demanded from him as far as his price goes, what's going to happen to the price?
Should continue to decrease.
It'll continue to decline. And how far will it go? Until it reaches marginal cost. It can't go below that, because then the producer will say, well, I'm losing money by this, or I'm losing money out of pocket. Now, if we had these conditions, it's argued that the market would drive price to equality with marginal cost. It would achieve justice. The consumers would get the full benefit of their collectively owned means of production. The market would be doing its duty to the Commonwealth. Now, you can also understand the hostility to any kind of big business, and to the bizarre conclusion that you will find in virtually all the mainstream textbooks that competition and rivalry are antithetical. How many of you have ever heard the claim that competition and rivalry are opposites? That's maintained by the doctrine of pure and perfect competition. And we'll see there's a kind of bizarre logic to it. Because if what you mean by competition is the requirements of driving price to equality with marginal cost, we'll see in just a moment that where rivalry exists, that will not be possible. Now, why? Well, suppose instead of having 10,000 firms each doing 1/100th of 1% of an industry's business, suppose we have 3 or 4 firms, and one of them might be doing 50% or 25%, some substantial part of the volume of the industry's business, which I think is pretty typical. Now, in that case, suppose that we have these firms in a recession, and a firm with some substantial part of the industry's overall volume that is operating well below capacity, it looks out and contemplates the profitability of cutting its price ever so much. All right, what would happen if, let's say, General Motors were to cut the price of one of its automobiles $50 or whatever? Now, General Motors is quite huge. If that's going to lead them to pick up any significant volume, where's the volume going to come from? The other firms. You see, if General Motors if General Motors were to go from 50% of capacity to 70 or 80% of capacity by some price cut, what would that imply about the loss of volume by its competitors?
They would lose their sales.
They would have a substantial loss, right? A loss big enough to make them sit up and take notice. And what would they have to do as the result of that kind of loss of volume?
Drop their price.
They would have to cut their price. Now then, it is argued, well, GM knows this. GM knows that if it cuts, the others will have to match its cut, because it's big enough to make them sit up and take notice. And therefore, General Motors won't cut, because it knows that if it cuts, its cut causes the whole industry to cut. And if the whole industry does cut, what will any individual firm gain?
Nothing.
Only as the quantity demanded increases along the industry demand curve. Let's say they all end up cutting. Okay, now they're all charging $50 or $100 less per car. How much more business is there just because the price has fallen $50 or $100? Not much. Now, it's on this basis that it's argued that where you have a so-called oligopoly, where the firms are significant, that the behavior of these alleged oligopolists will not differ in any fundamental way than the behavior of a single firm monopolist. And let's just pause on that for a moment. Suppose we had the whole auto industry owned by one firm, and it's in a recession. There's been a drop in demand for its automobiles. And it's contemplating, should it cut its price $100 or whatever. Now, what will determine, from its perspective, whether or not that's a profitable thing to do?
If the price cut will actually increase the demand.
How much the cut in price will increase the quantity demanded. Now, If it would increase the quantity demanded substantially, well, then maybe it's worth doing. But suppose the cut in price will only increase the quantity demanded by a lesser percentage than the cut in price. Then would it pay it to do it? No, so it wouldn't do it. Well, now, it's argued that the same point will apply to the oligopolist. Why? Because if any one of the oligopolists cuts his price, he knows that his action causes the others to respond, and the price of the whole industry will be driven down just as his price, and the only way he'll be able to benefit will be in proportion to his share of the increase in quantity demand of the whole industry, which is not enough. So it's argued that the behavior of the oligopolist is essentially the same as that of a single firm monopolist. Now, in contrast, suppose we have the pure and perfect competition situation. We have 10,000 insignificant sellers. Where will the extra business come from for any one of these 10,000 when he cuts his price ever so slightly?
One of the other 10,000.
From the others, but to what extent from any one of them? So if suppose here you are, you're doing 1/100th of 1% of the whole business, and now and you're at 50% of capacity. Now you go to full capacity. How much business do you take away from the other sellers? The business that you gain is spread out over 9,999 other firms. What kind of percentage loss does the average other firm have that is allowing you to go to full capacity?
No.
It's not even noticeable. You see, the argument is that if you're insignificant in size, then even though there's a big effect for you in going to full capacity, you're drawing your extra business from so many other small producers that none of them individually notice the loss to you. And so while they may end up cutting their price, they're not doing it because you have done it. They're not doing it in retaliation. They're not doing it in response. They don't regard you as a rival. They don't see you as a significant threat. Here you are, you double your business, but you're taking your extra 1/100th of 1% of the total market, and it's divided up among the other 9,999 producers. Each of them loses 1/100th of 1% of his business. They don't notice the loss. So the argument is that where you have this immense number of insignificant firms, each firm, looking at it from its own perspective, is in a position to hugely increase its volume, and no one else will notice the loss because the loss in volume is spread out over so many other producers. They don't sit up and take notice. In effect, you're a little rat scurrying away with a piece of cheese that no one else notices the loss of. But if you're General Motors and you cut your price, then everyone is going to notice because you'll take away too big a chunk of the other's cheese. So the argument is, where you have big firms, the big firms won't cut because they know that if they do cut, they compel the rest of the industry to cut. But if they're small and insignificant, then they do cut because their action, it's not their action that propels others to cut. Others will cut, but why? For their own reasons. They're acting independently. They're not acting in response to anything that you've done. And this is the basis for the alleged need for the vast number of individually insignificant producers. Yes, Mr. Feldman.
Yeah, it seems like in the airline industry that has a lot of relevance. Where it used to, maybe not as much today, but they used to cut prices when they were all had similar cost structures, and they would all cut prices. But now there's different types of airlines that have different value propositions, lower cost, different benefits. But so it's not as pertinent, but that.
Well, you see, I would infer just the opposite from what you said. See, the problem here is when they say that the large firms won't cut, they're assuming that the costs of all of these large firms are the same. That's an implicit assumption. There's an older idea that preceded the pure and perfect competition doctrine. This was the doctrine known as the representative firm. It goes back to Alfred Marshall. He conceived an industry as composed of a multiple of so-called representative firms, which would be a kind of average firm. And if you viewed all of the firms in an industry as being duplicates of one another, of an industry consisting of so many firms, all with the same costs, everything else essentially the same, then you do have no basis for a large firm cutting. But now consider, if you have a serious recession and there's a big drop in demand, do you think that prices remain unchanged on the part of big firms?
No?
There almost always is some significant price cutting. Now, why would that happen? Why? And I think that happens in the airline industry. A rational basis for it would be if the cost structures of the big firms are not the same. Let's suppose this situation. We have a low-cost producer and a high-cost producer. In the boom period, both of them were doing well. The low-cost producer doing better, but the high-cost producer doing quite okay. Now we have a recession, and both of these firms are operating well below capacity. There's been a sharp drop in demand for their services. But the low-cost producer finds that it has idle capacity that has a lower marginal cost than the price presently being received by the high-cost producer. And its marginal cost is way below the marginal cost of the high-cost producer. Well, what might be gained by the low-cost producer in cutting its price? How far does it have to cut?
You said the demand is still pretty strong, right?
No, the demand, we are in a recession, and both firms are suddenly operating well below capacity, but the low-cost firm has capacity that is idled that is much more efficient than the capacity of the high-cost firm that's still in operation.
Well, enough to bring some of their business over to that point.
Isn't the low-cost firm in a position, in this case, if it cuts its price below the operating cost of the high-cost firm, it's in a position to pick up the high-cost firm's business, right? And operate at a substantially higher level. And that could very well be profitable. If you're going to pick up a lot of business at the lower price, and you will pick it up, the low-cost firm has to meet it, but can it stay in the market if the price is below its operating cost?
No.
No. Well, then it pays the low-cost firm to cut, even though it's big, even though it knows that it compels the others to cut. It can reasonably cut in the expectation that it will drive some of the others out of the market and pick up their business. Now, you can never even think of along these lines if you're bogged down with the doctrine of the representative firm and you're thinking of an industry as being composed of all equal firms. Then it wouldn't pay. But it does pay when the firms are unequal and a low-cost firm cuts. Then it pays to do it. Now, that's really the least of the problems of the pure and perfect competition doctrine. The supporters of that doctrine end up thinking that the economy lacks price competition. This was a popular claim for years and years, that because of big business and oligopoly, we've lost price competition. When what they meant by price competition was this process of constantly chiseling price to marginal cost. What price competition means from the perspective of the supporters of pure and perfect competition is the process of driving price to equality with marginal cost. That's all they mean by it. And when they don't see that happening, they think, well, we no longer have price competition. Maybe we have competition in terms of packaging or some other less significant matters, but we don't have any genuine full-bodied price competition. Now, I want to point out how erroneous this idea is and how widespread price competition is in fact. In reality, price competition is offered by everybody who's charging prices that are too low for other people to make money at. That's price competition. And you can see some very recent very strong evidence of price competition in the bankruptcy of TWA and Bethlehem Steel. How did the prices of others relate to their bankruptcy? How did the prices charged by other airlines and other steel firms relate to the bankruptcy of TWA and Bethlehem Steel?
Other prices were below the marginal cost.
The prices of these other firms were too low for TWA and Bethlehem to be profitable. Suppose the others had charged higher prices. Suppose they had charged prices higher than they were. Well, how would that have affected what TWA and Bethlehem might have charged, or how much volume they would have had?
Probably would have increased.
Then either they could have charged higher prices and kept their present volume, or almost, or they could have maintained their prices and attracted additional business. They couldn't stay in business because of the prices charged by other firms. That's price competition. Now, we also had discussion earlier in the term about what's been happening to real prices practically every year, or certainly every decade, for the last 200 years or more. What's been happening? They've been driven down. And that process is price competition. And you find price competition going on even in the midst of inflation. Now, how would that be? Well, in inflation, what is typically happening to wage rates that all the different firms have to pay?
Going up.
They're going up, and that's operating to raise everybody's costs. But at the same time that wage rates and various materials prices may be going up, there are some firms that nevertheless figure out how to become more efficient. And that means that their costs go up by less than corresponds to the rise in wage rates and various materials prices. And so they can remain profitable even while raising their prices less than corresponds to the rise in wage rates and the materials costs. But what about firms that have not become more efficient? What happens to them? They have to match the prices of the firms that have become more efficient, that aren't raising them as much as these other firms need. So what do they have to do if they're going to stay in business? They have to either improve their efficiency or they have to go out of business. Now, what would you call this if not price competition? If the prices charged by some firms are profoundly influencing the behavior of other firms, that's price competition. But all of that is ignored by the theory of pure and perfect competition. It's focused on this moment-by-moment chiseling of prices to equality with marginal cost. It doesn't see all of this genuine price competition that's taking place on the basis of improving efficiency. And it also doesn't see how and why large firms do cut prices in recessions in order to make way for their more efficient idle capacity at the expense of the less efficient producing capacity of others. Now, that's actually point 8. Let me back up and say a little bit in connection with point 7, namely effects if price did have to equal marginal cost. If this alleged ideal, in fact, had to be achieved. Can any of you think of cases, fairly common cases, in which marginal cost is often zero or very close to zero? Well, have you ever, yeah,
I'm saying, in our industry, I'm in software.
in software.
Once we have the deliverable, outside of just putting it on CD, the excessive costs don't increase.
Well, your costs, you don't have any marginal costs of development of software that's already been developed.
Exactly.
All right. Now, the marginal cost of turning out additional units, there's some marginal cost. That would be the cost of the CD,
Right.
the labor of creating the CDs, turning them out. So that's some marginal cost. Have any of you been to the movies recently and at a time when there are empty seats in the theater, even though the movie is on? All right, what's the marginal cost of admitting some extra patrons?
Zero.
Would that be zero?
Yes.
You don't even need extra ushers or an extra ticket taker, an extra cashier in the ticket booth. Does it cost any more to run the same picture before half a theater full of people or the whole theater full of people?
No?
No. So the marginal cost is zero. Well, in those circumstances, what should be the price of a movie admission?
Great.
It should be free. The argument would be, if the theater is not filling up, maybe the cashier should start reducing the price in the box office window, but they're not allowed to advertise this because advertising is a market imperfection, according to the same theory. Another demand is that people have full, perfect knowledge of what's going on in the market. If they don't have full knowledge, that's an imperfection. So they would need to have seen the movie already several times. And also, you need to have a huge number of movie theaters all showing the same movie in the same area. I actually use this example. Imagine we have 400 movie theaters within a very short distance of one another, all showing the same movie, and they don't have a full audience. Well, in that case, if any one theater were to trim its price a little bit, and the only concern people had was which is the cheapest theater, well, if it trims its price a little tiny bit, it can gain one customer from each of the other 399 theaters. They'll have to turn people away unless they have more than 400 seats. So allegedly, it would have the incentive, and so things would work according to the theory of pure and perfect competition. But this obviously is close to madness, so things don't actually go that way. Now, also, you have the same situation. Suppose you have a baseball game where there are some empty seats, an opera performance where there are some empty seats. What about a train that is not fully occupied, or an airplane that takes off with empty seats? What's the marginal cost in all of these cases? Either zero or very close to it. In the airline case, maybe to carry an extra passenger, they need an extra pint of fuel. I don't know. So it's practically zero. Now, the implication of this would be that if price had to equal marginal cost, then very often it would be zero. It would have to be zero. And even in cases in which you have some marginal cost, if the price had to be marginal cost, let's say in the automobile industry, the steel industry, the software industry, wherever, let's say there is some marginal cost, but if we had extensive periods in which you can't cover anything of your fixed costs, what would happen to the amount of fixed capacity in a short time?
You couldn't cover the cost?
If you couldn't cover the fixed costs, because price had to be marginal cost, equal to marginal cost, what would be the effect on the amount of fixed capacity after we went through some period in which you're just not covering its cost?
You have to reduce it.
It would be reduced, and we'd have a sufficient reduction in the amount of fixed capacity that the fixed capacity that was left would operate at full capacity often enough so that it would pay. The net effect would be we'd lose a substantial amount of our fixed capacity. Now, that would not be a benefit. Having this fixed capacity is very, very valuable because it gives us great flexibility. We can have major changes in demand among different industries. The demand for some industries can go up substantially, and with enough capacity on hand, when the demand for an industry goes up, it's possible to meet the demand from existing capacity. We have the capacity. We don't have to first go out and build it. We already have it. So that means we can have swings in demand from one industry to another, and we have the ability to supply it quickly without having to first build the capacity. If the world worked according to this theory, we'd have a situation in which we'd be very, very quickly coming up against bottlenecks. Anytime the demand increased the least little bit from in any one line, suddenly you'd have a scarcity of capacity. There'd be no limit to the rise in price. So that kind of world would not be a very effective one. That's the point B under 7, smaller industries that would operate at capacity more often. Okay, any comments, questions, observations, whatever? All right, well, I don't think we have time to have an adequate discussion of the cartel issue. I cover it in the text, and hopefully that will be sufficient. Next week, we're going to go into the concept of productive activity and the productivity theory of wages. We'll be dealing with the productivity theory of wages. So, have a good week.